Now to the Conservative MP, Tom Tugendhat, who leads the China Research Group and is one of those MPs sanctioned by China. Mr. Tugendhat, thank you very much for talking to us this morning. Your colleague Ian Duncan-Smith says he will wear these sanctions as a badge of honour. What's your reaction to them?
Well, look, I was elected to speak for the people of Tunbridge and Mourning in the recent election. I was elected to chair the Foreign Affairs Committee by the whole House of Commons, opposition and government MPs alike. And so I view this as a direct assault on British democracy and an attempt to silence the British people have chosen to speak for them. If that isn't an assault on the British sovereignty, I don't know what is.
Dominic Raab, the Foreign Secretary, says, and we quoted him a few moments ago, if Beijing wants to credibly rebut claims of human rights abuses in Xinjiang, it should allow the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights full access to verify the truth. It speaks volumes, he said, that while the UK joins the international community in sanctioning those responsible for human rights abuses, the Chinese government sanctions its critics. Do you expect any further action beyond these words from the Foreign Secretary against China now?
Well, look, I think Dom's absolutely right. I think the Foreign Secretary is absolutely right that it is pretty striking that those who speak out against the human rights violations of Chinese citizens are condemned by the Chinese Communist Party. I think that's, let's be quite clear. We're not talking about the defense of anybody else's citizens, but Chinese citizens whose rights have been violated, who've been raped, sterilized, whose culture has been destroyed. Those who defend them are criticized by the Chinese government. It is quite extraordinary. But actually, this isn't about China. This is about the UK. The Foreign Affairs Committee has not actually condemned China in any way in particular. What we've done is we've spoken about the abuses that China is conducting here in the UK. We've spoken about China's attempt to interfere in academic freedom here in the UK. We've spoken about China's attempt to organize protests against British government policies here in the UK. And we've spoken about the attempt to silence different Chinese voices and indeed British voices speaking about things that we're allowed to speak about because this is a free country here in the UK. We're talking about Britain's sovereignty. Now, we've had a lot of talk recently about what sovereignty means. Well, frankly, if it doesn't mean the rights of the British people to choose who speaks for them and what they say, it means nothing at all.
So to pick up on my last question to you, do you think any further action is needed from the UK government towards China at this point, given that the government has said it wants to pursue a positive trade and investment relationship, given that it wants to work with China on climate change, biodiversity, other key issues?
Well, of course, we want to work together with China on those issues. They're fundamentally in China's interest, not just ours. I mean, after all, it's China that's seeing the salination of its paddy fields on the eastern seaboard, that's seeing literally millions of megatons of rice in danger and their vast population in danger of being food deficient. So these are fundamentally in China's interests. It's China that sees protests about pollution across the whole of China. And this is something that has been well recorded and indeed well reported by the BBC.
So sorry to interrupt, but are you saying, therefore, that you think the UK government shouldn't respond further to these sanctions at this time?
No, I'm saying that the British government should make it absolutely plain today and now that it stands with the democratic rights of the British people to express their views in whatever way they see fit. This is, after all, what sovereignty means. There's no point in taking back control from Brussels, only to hand it over to Beijing.
But beyond that, is there any way for you to address your concerns about the treatment of the Uyghur people?
Well, I think there are many ways in which we can address our concerns, but it's quite noticeable that the Chinese state has now injected major doubt in anybody doing business with China. A number of years ago, if you went to China, you had the reasonable expectation that you would be able to get on the return flight. Now that is no longer true. H&M has been banned from China for simply saying that they will not accept slave-made goods, which frankly is a confession by the Chinese state that they do make slave-made goods. If you told a UK company that they weren't allowed to make slave-made goods, they would turn around and say, well, that's not a problem, we don't do it. But clearly the Chinese state feels that they have to expel H&M for merely stating something that most of us would think was a perfectly reasonable thing to say. So what we're seeing at the moment is we are seeing a vulnerable and weak China that has failed in its diplomatic outreach to states around the region. It has failed to undermine the coalition of countries that are standing up for human rights, and it has failed to undermine the connection between the UK, the US, and indeed Europe. And so what they're doing is they're lashing out. Now, this sadly is a sign of weakness, and not a sign of strength, and a demonstration that President Xi is failing the Chinese people, failing the Chinese Communist Party, and indeed failing the whole world.
Tom Tugendhat MP, thank you very much for your time this morning.